The Happy Warrior Podcast. Conservative commentary on the news of the day from a more positive perspective.
As far as I'm concerned, the most fundamental question for the future of knowledge production in classics is this. How do we recognize, honor, and repair the silencing of the knowledges that people of color carry? How do we perform and validate and support the reparative epistemic justice that the discipline so sorely needs? It's here that I will insist on a slight corrective to the glittery discourse of inclusion. For this reparative epistemic justice to take hold, holders of privilege will need to surrender their privilege. And in practical terms, this means that in an economy of academic prestige defined and governed by scarcity, white men will have to surrender the privilege they have of seeing their words printed and disseminated. They will have to take a back seat so that people of color and women and gender nonconforming scholars of color benefit from the privileges, career and otherwise, of seeing their words on the page. Again, however, I emphasize that this is an economy of scarcity that at the level of journal publication will remain to a degree zero-sum, until and unless this system of publication is dismantled, which would be fine by me. Every person of color who is to be published will take the place of a white man whose words could have or had already appeared in the pages of that journal. And that would be a future worth striving for. Thank you.
Hello again, everyone. I am your host, Happy Warrior Pete, and this is the Happy Warrior Podcast, episode number 35. I'm so excited to be here with all of you today. You were probably wondering, what was that really boring piece of audio with all the big words? I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand what he was saying. It was like a different language. Oh, well, I'd love to tell you. That was Professor Daniel Padilla Peralta. And he was speaking at and you're going to love this, the 2019 annual meeting of the Society for Classical Studies. I know that doesn't help a lot. That professor, that clip of audio you're hearing, was talking about what needs to happen to make the realm of classicism more intersectional and engaging with minorities. And I started with this. We're going to do the first segment, and it's about this specific workshop that was at this. It was called the Sesquicentennial, am I saying that right? Sesquicentennial, there we go, Sesquicentennial Workshop. Or that's the 150th anniversary of this place. And it was amazing. It's an incredible essay. I'm getting it here from Professor Mary Frances Williams, and she was at this, and she ignited a huge furor, just trying to get my words together. And it's called, you can find it in Quillette, How I Was Kicked Out of the Society of Classical Studies annual meeting. It is fantastic. And I want to try something again here. So I put this to you last year. I put it to you, and I want to say it was an episode between 25 and 30. I asked you, is intersectionality in the United States of America, but in the Western world at large, a religion? Andrew Sullivan, the fantastic writer for The Intelligencer, New York Post, lots of places, has put this forward. And just recently I read another piece about this very same subject from David French. And he called it the Two-Faith Nation. And he said that the most successful philosophy in the last 100 years, if you had to choose a philosophy, and you include any religion in this, include any idea, any set of government feelings, so conservatism, progressive, including all. He says the idea of big governmentism and intersectionality, that is the most successful religion in the last 100 years. And it got me to thinking, how am I supposed to handle this? The idea of intersectionality. It seems everywhere these days. It seems infested in everything, when everyone. You can't go anywhere these days without thinking about the issues of intersectionality. Even if you don't want to, they come into your home either through the airwaves or in some few cases through the door, and they will make their opinions heard. Think about with me for this. Here's some of the examples I want you to think about. like a church, they have privilege, okay? And what is privilege? Privilege to them is their version of original sin, okay? In the Judeo-Christian philosophy, remember, original sin is the sin that Adam and Eve took upon themselves when they got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, okay? And it's this that makes man corrupt and gives us our fallen nature. That's a general belief between most Judeo-Christian theologies in some form or another. They have becoming woke. Now, what is becoming woke? Becoming woke is waking up and you can't go back to sleep. You start seeing all the problems in the world all around you, all the lack of wokeness. And my mom is always asking, what does woke mean? I don't understand. What is woke? Well, woke to them is justification for whatever they feel they want to do. Becoming woke, being woke justifies what they want to happen. And how can you repent? How can you repent of your original sin, your privilege? Well, you can be an ally. That is their form of sanctification repentance. You be an ally to those minorities. You give up your own position and give it to others. You don't have a voice, like the Professor Padilla was saying, and you give it to a poor minority that otherwise would never be allowed to speak. And see, original sin, privilege. Justification is like becoming woke, and sanctification is becoming an ally. And there's more to this, but this is the general idea. I want you all guys to keep this in mind when we talk about today's episode, because in all three of my hard news segments, all of them are touched with this theology, this theology of intersectionality. And it's really important for people on the center left, the people that we used to call liberals and the classical liberals, and the people on the right, the conservatives and the libertarians. They all need to learn that intersectionality, the reason why it holds so much power and sway in the hearts of man, particularly in the youth, my generation below, the reason why it holds so much sway is because it is in their hearts and minds at that same level where a faith or religion usually would be. And so let's go back to Padilla. So what was I talking about? Well, the Classical Studies annual meeting. This is the Society for Classical Studies. What are classical studies? Well, classical studies is what every of our founders, almost every single of our founders studied this. When we had the Great Enlightenment and when we were bringing knowledge, not to the masses, but to many more people, it was knowledge to people outside of the monastery. When we had the Renaissance and then the Great Enlightenment, they would study the classics. And to them, the classics were studies that were in Latin, Old Italian, and Greek. Okay? By the way, Greek and Latin were by far the biggest. And they would study people like Aristotle and Plato, Demosthenes, Lighty. I'm not a classicist. My friend and producer Robert Mehling knows this area because his background is in history, and he could tell you about it. But this is what the classics were, and it was the classics that informed the. They weren't the only thing, but they were a big part that informed the founders when they were making government and when they rebelled from the British. George Washington, you know the city of Cincinnati? Yeah. The city of Cincinnati is named after Cincinnatus. Cincinnatus was this guy in, I want to say 150 BC, was this general that rose up, fought for Rome. He could have become, like later Caesar would, he could have become king and taken over. But he put the power back and he went back to his fields and his farm and he plowed. And that was the guy that General George Washington, then President George Washington, looked to when he had his farewell address. And by the way, if you have never read George Washington's farewell address, that is a must read. I mean, that is a brilliant speech, very powerful. If you've seen the musical Hamilton, that last song they do is based on the writing of the farewell address. So classicists were very, very important. They're behind everything in the Western world, in Europe and in America. All the gains we made after the Renaissance were put on the foundation of the things we learned from the Romans and the Greeks. We said, where can we go? What knowledge was lost? And we turned to them. And many of the great leaders of history were huge classicists. Winston Churchill. I just watched what was that? I can't think of the name of it, but the new Winston Churchill movie that came out last year, which is fantastic. Winston Churchill, people do not know this, but he was an expert on Homer. He wrote several volumes on Homer, I know, Winston Churchill was a man of many hats, a very talented man. He was an expert on Homer. Classicists have had great influence in history. That's a fact. So, here's a problem. The field of classicists is not doing well these days because going to school is so high. And now the smart ones, they just go for a profession that will turn into a vocation. So I'm not going to study something that will turn into money. Okay, the smart ones, you'll get an engineering degree, you'll get a medical degree, you'll get a biology degree. You want to go to medical school. I mean, you use that well. Or if you're not so smart, you go to the gender and minority studies, right? And that's almost a useless degree. But classicists aren't there because classicists are so hard. You have to learn Greek. You have to learn Latin. If not, you have to at least understand the grammar and the world they came from. And being a classicist is very difficult. It's a hard study. That's why it never was part of me growing up. It used to be this was a part of a good education in the United States of America, especially in the 17th and 18th and 19th centuries. Classicists, they just aren't doing well. They're having a hard time to justify themselves because think about this. You could go in for debt for like $230,000 and you'll know how to read Greek and Latin. You'll know all the great old Greek scholars of their day. But how will that turn into a job? And it's hard to justify that. So this was the subject that they were all talking about at the 2019 annual meeting of the Society for Classical Studies. And it's interesting to note that this workshop was almost completely and utterly dedicated to fixing the intersectional problems and representation in that field. This is a little different. They say usually these things, they go 2 to 3 hours. They're just people, 6 people, and they'll give papers, and the audience gets to say something, and they're usually not overly political. In fact, they're usually quite boring. Well, for the wonderful Professor Williams, Mary Frances Williams, this was what she expected and what she got were completely different because this one was completely and utterly political, and political as in intersectional. And Bond noticed this. They had speakers that are saying we need to no longer have our students learn Greek and Latin. Instead, we should just have them focus on translations. And she's saying this is now the professor has it written. He's like, there's no point to doing this because if we don't know how to read the language, we'll never be able to put out future volumes. I mean, who's going to put out a new future translation if our students don't know how to read Greek? Fair point. Another one was bemoaning about this guy named Basil Leno, which, by the way, I think is that the name of Basil's the name of the rat in the Great Mouse Detective. Basil Leno, who believed in slavery. He lived in the 19th century, the 1800s. He didn't have all the correct opinions we would like him to have today. However, he was the top guy on this obscure Greek poet named Pindar. Pindar. That is a great name, by the way. Name your first son Pindar. There were lots of gripes like this. There are people, we should leave them alone because we don't have enough women. We don't have enough minorities, scholars, and focus. Not just the scholars, but the people in ancient times that we're going to focus on. Well, these intersectionality ideas hit their zenith in this conference with the final speaker, Professor Dan Yell, there's a hyphen between the name, Padilla Peralta from Princeton University. And he was completely and utterly thick. Here's just a paragraph from him. Already by the historical process of convening this conference in locations that are not only ludicrously expensive to travel to, but are rife with micro and macro aggressions that target people of color. The SCS does people of color no favors. He mentioned in his speech, he goes on to mention, talking about revolting racial profiling. And he wants to discuss holding hotel and conference center staffs in a racially equitable standard. With that part, remember, I just shared with you, he talks about how these journals are asymmetries of power and authority, and they impoverish knowledge production in fields of classics by perpetuating the epistemic and hermeneutic injustice of denying a space and place for scholars of color. And if you recall, in that part I just played, he actually goes out and say that white men, quote, white men will have to surrender the privilege they have of seeing their words printed and disseminated. So you can pretty much tell that there's hardly anyone more woke than Professor Padilla. Now, Professor Frances Williams, she is like, I came here for a boring lecture because I wanted to learn how we are going to open up the classicists, how we are going to get more students in, make it more accessible, but not water it down. And so Professor Williams was really brave, and she got up and she decided to ask questions of the council that were speaking that day. And listen to this exchange. This is mind-boggling crazy. It is crazy. I encourage all of you to please listen to the full 5 minutes. It is a tad long, but it is really important to hear the interaction between what used to be the normal classics professor with the new intersectional crew. The first woman you hear is, of course, Professor Mary Frances Williams. And then the second woman you hear, that's, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that is Professor Sarah Bond of Iowa. And then at the end of the clip, you're going to hear Padilla speak. That all the clip is important, but particularly the last minute. Thank you.
Okay, I'll probably offend all of you. I had three main things that I wanted to say. And to preface that, I'll add a fourth, which is I don't think you should abandon the languages. So if you abandon the languages, we don't have anything left. You're just destroying the entire discipline. You can't teach history without knowing something of the languages. You can't teach literature without knowing something of the languages, or we don't have classics. So to say it's inevitable is a real problem. And so that brings me to my first point, which is, for 30 years I've heard you talk about the need for diversity and inclusiveness and reaching out and doing women in the ancient world and all sorts of other areas, which is fine. It's interesting, it's important, and people who can do that well should do it. But maybe we should start defending our discipline in of itself and saying it's Western civilization, it matters because it's the West.
Western civilization
it's
is
everything.
A construct.
Okay,
That's
it
complete
matters.
Construction.
It's important, particularly in its focus on liberty, democracy, and freedom. Okay, we need to stand up for it and say we are Western Civ. Up until 100 years ago,
we aren't Western Civ.
We're not. Then we might as well just shut down. Then
I taught Western Civ for many years as a historian.
Can I finish my point? Okay, I know you're very important. You're all very important, but
that's not the point.
We should defend our discipline to the administration, to whoever's giving money, to whoever's doing the hiring, and say, look, we have value. We don't have to only do women's studies, only do ethnic studies, only do a balkanization of our field. We have value in and of itself. And secondly, I think that you should, I know, shocking, maybe try doing the classics, okay? To Professor Hines' point, which is really important, the kids that come in don't know anything. They don't know what's available. They don't know what classics is. They don't know anything about anything. And if you can give them a survey course, you can give them a freshman great books course and incorporate classics in that, you can expose them to the greats. That's really, really important. Okay? We don't teach Homer. We don't teach Cicero.
I teach them every semester.
In English? As a survey,
yes,
undergraduate English?
I have a history PhD.
Most departments don't. Okay?
Okay. All right. So I would like to respond.
No, I looked it up.
I think it's time that we get to respond because I think you're spreading a lot of falsities that I've.
It's a falsity to say why don't we teach Thucydides and Herodotus?
I just finished teaching Thucydides in Greek for the Greek survey, and then I taught him in English. You cannot say across the board that we aren't teaching Thucydides.
I am saying across the board. The University of California, Davis, Professor Hexter isn't here. The classics in English courses consist of mythology and vocabulary, and that's it. Okay?
Okay.
So I'm saying Cicero has value. Homer has value. Demosthenes
Absolutely.
has value because it will teach you about defending democracy. But people don't want that, okay?
Right. You've listed all men of the authors that you would prefer us to read, by the way.
I am not a socialist, okay? I believe in merit. I believe that the journals have articles on the basis of merit.
Right.
I don't look at the color of the author.
And you don't think that Sappho has merit.
Okay, you may have got your job because you're black, but I would prefer to think you got your job because of merit.
Yeah, we saw that coming.
Say the truth. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, and I think we should allow other people to participate in this conversation at the risk of having this conversation hijacked. But what I'll say simply is that if this vision of the classics is the vision that you find as affirming,
you're saying that people of color, black people, Hispanic people,
I let you finish.
They're not capable.
I did not interrupt you once. So you are going to let me talk. You are going to let someone who has been historically marginalized from the production of knowledge in classics talk. And here's what I have to say about the vision of classics that you've outlined. If that is in fact the vision that affirms you and your white supremacy, I want nothing to do with it. I hope the field dies that you've outlined and that it dies as swiftly as possible. And I fervently hope, that those of you in the room will take stock and consideration of what has happened here.
I thought that I would be able to speak. Yeah. I thought that I would be able to speak rather than to be marginalized.
In the interest of equity.
But obviously, your field has decided that there's only a certain point of view.
Go for it.
Wow, that is something else, isn't it? Yeah, I apologize for the bit of the length, but it was important that you heard the full exchange, because in journalism, particularly with the podcast format that gives you so much flexibility, I've been trying to give you the full context and the full part of the clip. I don't want people to be accusing me that I, cut it or deceptively edit it. I want you to have the full and big picture, because that's the responsible thing to do, especially if you're on a podcast and you have room for it. That last part, though, where he says, here's what I have to say about your vision of classics that you've outlined. If that is in fact a vision that affirms you and your white supremacy, I want nothing to do with it. I hope the field dies, that you've outlined dies, and that it dies as swiftly as possible. Professor Padilla, justifying a reason for the study of the classics to continue forward. That is crazy. He basically just said, well, classicism sucks, and if it dies, that's okay. Really? I thought you were the Princeton expert. Apparently he is, and apparently classicists have to die, which is really sad. Now, I bet all of you can guess how this turned out. Yes, it turned out wonderful. She was pushed off the mic. Well, she wasn't physically pushed, but she had security right there, like, get out of here. You heard at the end of the clip, the crowd is cheering. Oh, yeah, you took her down. Oh, yeah, you put her in her spot with a white supremacist. We are going to stand for those marginalized, one-armed, non-gender conforming, racial minority, Islamic children, okay? We need to stand up for them, and we will not take that professor's white supremacy. We will not stand for it. No, sir. No, sirree, bop. Yeah, so it did not go well. So she found out the next day, Helen Collier, she was the director for this organization. She said, you're out. You're out. You're out of the organization. What you did was harassment. Of course, Collier never gave her a chance to respond or defend herself. And then the SCC put out this big email, and there was a couple articles in some college newspapers. They're talking about the evils of how we have worked so hard to prevent microaggressions at the SCS. Yes, though I don't know how that was a microaggression. In their world, isn't that a macroaggression? Whatever. Yeah. And they mischaracterized what she said. They only focused, of course, the one part where he said he got only. This is how they wrote it. He only got his job because he was black. That's not what she said. I gave you the full context. They did not. And Collier, this has led to her losing all kinds of jobs. She was the writer for scholarly newspaper. She was kicked off of that. Her career is pretty much over. I mean, she's done. I mean, she may have a career writing and being part of the intellectual dark web, but in the world of scholarly input, she is done. And that sucks. She sounds like a very interesting person that really cares about this field. You know, you don't have to agree with her about her feelings on these things, but let her speak and do her research. I mean, that used to be the lifeblood of the field. But of course, now it's more important that we read and learn about the indigenous communities. I cannot speak today. Sorry, guys. And their literature. Or we need to hear about the women on Sappho. Yes. We no longer need to learn Homer and Plato and Aristotle and Demosthenes and all our fun Greek names that I cannot pronounce worth darn. No, we don't need that anymore, which is sad. But why did they feel so strongly about it? See, that's the thing. These are all professionals. These are leaders in their field. Yes, it's an obscure field these days, but they are leaders in it nonetheless. And these people are cheering and clapping the takedown of this woman who basically said Western civilization isn't so bad and we should encourage our students to learn it. And that was, in their minds, the equivalent of a microaggression and white supremacy. They are saying little old Professor Mary Frances Williams from Texas, I believe, she is a white supremacist. Yes, because we all know so many white supremacists. They are just experts on Greek and Latin literature. I mean, when you go to the Daily Stormer, they just have long, winding essays about Homer and how in his writings he never liked to use the color blue. That was a thing that Winston Churchill had a theory about. Just crazy. Craziness, okay? In the normal world, this is insane. But here's the problem. The normal world is becoming more and more like this every day. Intersectionality doesn't just stay in academia. You know, intersectionality, 100 years ago, that's where it still was. It's kind of grew from that. But now it's everywhere, right? It's in everywhere, in everything, every movie, every TV show, every video game, every... I don't know. You choose it. You know, pick anything. Chances are intersectionality will be involved somehow. And it's really too bad. It really is too bad. You know. And here's the bigger problem. What happens if you want to reason with them? Like she did. She saw how she tried to make the reason. She says, our work is obscure. Students don't have an incentive to do it. If we don't teach students the classics and how to read them, our field will die out. And what did the guy say? Good. Let it burn. That's right. Let it die. Yeah, die. You know, that's Emperor Palpatine. And they cheered. They cheered when he said the classicism should die. Yeah, let classicists die. Yeah. That's nuts. You don't, I mean, that's like, you go to the engineering department, the physicists, and you're like, well, I don't care if physics isn't done by the poor minorities that normally aren't allowed to speak. Well, then physics should die. I mean, you don't see that. That's what they're advocating here. When you try to reason with them, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Just last year, we had Dr. Peter Boghossian, James Pluck-Rose, and someone else. I don't have all the names right in front of me. But remember, they had this experiment. It's called now Sokol Squared, where they put out lots of papers into all these different academic journals and what can be called grievance studies. So Black studies, Asian studies, Native American studies, women's liberation studies, yada, yada, yada. Those are the grievance studies. And their theory was that they will just take about anything. That this isn't really academic research, because academic research has rules. Just like in experimentation for science, there are standards. And they're saying, let's try to put something in. We'll play by their rules, and we will prove that it is bullcrap. And they did. They did. They really did. Some of the papers they put in were hilarious. My favorite was about the rape dog parks, where the paper claimed it closely examined the genitals of 10,000 dogs in dog parks to learn about the rape culture and queer performativity. Lots of big words today. That one was my favorite, but they also got another one in where they just took pieces of Mein Kampf and they put it into a women's studies journal, a very big one in the world of women's studies, and it passed. And they had 7 of these that had either been published or were about to be published when they revealed their thing. So what did they say? You know what? They're right. Our standards are too low. We aren't looking at our literature and academia more critically. We should second guess these things and make people prove their work. No, that is not what they took. Instead, they all doubled down. All these academic organizations and the media that learned of the story doubled down about how unethical it was to do this human experiment. Yes, a human experiment, because you didn't let the journal people know beforehand that you were giving them fake studies. They didn't know your papers were fake, and thereby it was a human experiment. And they're still dealing with this right now. Peter Boghossian, James Lindsay, most of all. I think Rose plucked Rose. I'm not sure she saw anything bad from this. But it's crazy. It's crazy. He says now, Peter Boghossian, he teaches at Portland State University. He's saying people treat him like a clown now. He says, I've been spat on. I've been physically threatened. Instead of applauding him for exposing all this nonsense, he has been threatened by Portland State University to hurt his career and his job. No one learned a dang thing. And this is where I go back to my first comments. You know what it's called when no matter how much evidence you provide, you can never change a person's mind about an ideology? We call that religion. Okay? Religion. I am a religious person. And I know there is a level, there's a truth to this. I mean, I think people are somewhat reasonable and they're willing to discuss ideas, but in the end of the day, believing that, a son of God died, came back to life in 3 days, he healed the blind, the sick, the lepers, he raised the dead, all this is unprovable. And you have to take it on faith. And faith is not best, it can partially be based on evidence, but in a whole, you have to make a leap some point. Okay? And people do, when I saw this on my mission all the time, you would bring the facts to them. And you would say, one of the claims was, well, the Bible is the perfect word of God. And now we would say, look, the Bible is the word of God, but it is by mankind. And there are books that are missing. There are prophets that are referred to that are no longer in there. You guys, I believe in the Bible is a beautiful work. I do believe it is the divine wisdom of our God and our Lord Jesus Christ. But it does have flaws, and to point that out, though, is like no, they can't see it. Try to reason someone on faith. We had this when I talked about Vic Mignogna, and I talked about, and there was this audio clip where he tries to talk with them. I want to say they're Southern Baptists, but anyhow, it doesn't matter. There's some kind of evangelical, and he tells them, look, we need to lead people to love the church. We can't just attack them and make fun of them and call them names about being queers and gays and whatever. We have to guide them and show them that what a Christian's really like. And how did that happen? No, it just got heated. It just got angry. People with religious beliefs don't like those religious beliefs questioned. What happens when you question intersectionality? Did they appear with reason, or did their voices get a little louder? Did they were willing to find compromise or try to find some insight from our comments, or were they wanting to use it as a hammer to attack the enemy? Or them. Well, please keep all these things in mind. I will take a quick 30-second break, and then I will be back to you with some fun stories and just some really interesting stuff. I want to talk about what's going on with Ilhan Omar, and then later on the show, I call this section Super Squad Unites, Nights. Silicon Valley and the federal government versus the anti-vax campaign. It's going to be a riveting adventure. All this and more on the Happy Warrior Podcast.
Maybe we can waste time.
Oh, man, aren't people fantastic? Well, I have this story of this woman that was trying to steal Florida man's spot. This is, I'm just going to play some of the audio of this news report. This is I wish I was with the reporters when they did this, because it's such a fantastic, and they do this all in Monopan. They are dead serious about this story. This is from Jacksonville, Florida, ABC 13.
Our camera was rolling, chased down the woman accused of stealing an SUV from the Ace Rent-A-Car Thursday afternoon. Employees say they found her with the stolen car at the Travelodge off Airport Road. Did you steal a car?
Oh, I don't know what you're speaking about, ma'am.
Well, we have you on video wearing that same outfit.
Oh, really? That's nice.
Why did you take the car?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Demons told me to do it.
Who told you to do it?
The demons.
Demons told you to steal the car. Why did they tell you to do that?
I don't know. I really don't know.
So you admit you took it?
No, I didn't take it. The demon took it.
The demon took it.
The demon told you to take it? Yeah, demon told you to. Why did the demon tell you to take it? I don't know. Tell me to take it. The demon told you to take it. Yeah, demon. So you admit you took it? No, the demon did. I love that. I love that. It's such a weird story. So this news crew follows this woman who steals a rental car, and they do this interview, and she's smiling and she's dead serious. A demon did? Yes. Oh, that is fantastic. If you guys don't know what Florida Man is, it's this Twitter log of just really, really dumb things that happen in Florida. Apparently, Florida has a very high population of low intelligent people or lacking wisdom. And this should be there. It should. This is a Florida Man moment. Okay, one more Florida Man moment. I think this is Florida. Is this Florida? Oh my gosh, I think it is. It is. Okay, I have another Florida story. This is great. Now, this doesn't have a video, but the story is, Papano Beach boy winds up trapped in cooler during game of hide and seek. Igloo issues recall for 4 coolers after seeing local 10 store. So, this family, they're very intelligent. 5-year-old son is playing hide and seek. He crawls into a water cooler. Nicholas is what Nicholas says. I wanted to play hide and seek, but I found a not good hiding spot inside the cooler. So his parents, Robert and Maria Waynes, were cleaning up after the day on their boat. They had emptied and cleaned their 72-quart cooler and left it on their deck. They thought it was cute when Nicholas climbed up into it after family members went into the kitchen. And according to the timestamp surveillance video, he was inside for almost 2 minutes playing, while the top was slightly ajar, resting on the latch, and it closed. I was really scared, Nicholas said, recalling how he screamed for help. Anyhow, the kid was fine. They got him out. But he gets better. Here's where the Florida Man moment. So, you think these parents, by the way, are idiots. But maybe child neglect. Why are you letting your kid play in a cool... Haven't you ever seen an old 90s... family drama where a kid dies in a refrigerator or it eats plastic or something? Apparently not. Total Florida Man. Here's what they say. Here's who's really to blame. I know we're all supposed to watch our kids and make sure they don't crawl into the cooler, but as we know it only takes a second to turn away. And we just don't want another family to not hear their child go through this. So they complained that the problem was the cooler. And Igloo actually put out a press release. That's the best part of the story. Igloo put out a press release. It's been brought to our attention that a child recently inadvertently trapped himself inside one of our products. We are very sorry for the scare this incident must have caused the child and his family, and are very happy no one was injured. So they are recalling 4 coolers. And so because of this family, you will now get lousy coolers from Igloo. Because some of us, when we close our cooler, we expect them to stay closed. Not so. You see, it wasn't the kid's fault. It wasn't the parents' fault for the kid getting stuck in the cooler. It was a design flaw that when you close a cooler lid, it locks and therefore can't be opened until you unlock it. This is one of those don't when on the ladders they say don't eat ladder or don't eat fire, it burns. This is one of those moments, and this is how we get these. And you know what? I would not be surprised if they sue Igloo and make some money off of this. It's I can't believe it. Our society always looking out for number one, always looking for a buck. All right, that's the end for the fun and games for now. Let's move back to hard news. There is part of intersectionality. So you ask yourself, who are the king of the intersectionals? Who are the people that really buy into this cultural religion? Are they the ones the intersectionals are devoted to, the minorities? No. Hispanics are very, in their own families, socially conservative. They're, both blacks and Hispanics are fairly religious. Hispanics are more Catholic. Blacks tend to be a bit more evangelical. Both are fairly religious. Both have views against gay marriage and abortion, generally speaking. No. A study came out in the last month, and there was an article in the Atlantic that led with this, but I'm just reading a summary with reason, that found that actually, in the United States, the most politically intolerant Americans, and see if you believe this, are, quote, whiter, more highly educated, older, more urban, and more partisan themselves. This research proves that the most intersectional of us all are wealthy, white, urban men and women. And this is true in my home community here in South Dakota. There's a guy I know. His family is very rich. They're very successful. I like him. He's on the left. We talk a lot on Facebook. I like the guy, generally speaking. I won't give him his name because I don't want to embarrass anybody. But he, as wealthy and well off as he is, and his understanding of how businesses thrive, he is still a giant socialist. I've seen him post many things on Facebook where he's like, end capitalism, begin socialism, let's end all that tyranny. And they believe it, and it's incredible. Now you'll see this all the time that the leaders and the big voices on intersectionality are often white rich people, white urban rich progressive liberals, and it's so true. As soon as you read, they're like, "Wow, that is true." I'm serious. It's true. They are the leaders of the religion of intersectionality. So let's move to Ilhan Omar. Ilhan Omar, everybody's favorite anti-Semite. And this is actually a subject I actually know quite a bit about, and I talked about with my friend and producer Robert Mehling as soon as she was elected. I was like, you gotta watch this chick. She's loco. She's a true believer. She's a fruitcake. She was married to her brother for almost a decade. She talks about the evils of Zionism. She likes to retweet Al Jazeera and Holocaust deniers. I mean, she is as crazy as they come. She fights Rashida Tlaib, it's Tlaib. I always have a hard time pronouncing that, for belief in the Palestinian anti-Zionism ideology. There are true believers that believe that Zionism is evil, and to a certain extent, I can definitely say this of Omar, Jews are the problem. And this last week, it came to a head. See, she's had many moments where she says stuff like this. Many moments now. There's a fantastic article by Matthew Continetti. He is the editor at the Free Beacon, Washington Free Beacon, and I don't know, the title's kind of off. It's called The Collapse of the Center Left. And he has this great line. He says, I have this new hobby. It's collecting the excuses Democrats make for Ilhan Omar, the Minnesota Democrat congresswoman who has an unhealthy fixation on Jewish influence, Jewish money, and Jewish loyalty. And I remember the tweet where this is from 2012. Before she was a representative in the National Congress, she was a representative, though, in Minnesota. And she said that, quote, Israel has hypnotized the world. Yes, Israel has hypnotized the world. She said, and this is, now we're getting to the stuff that is why we had all this controversy. She said recently that the only reason Congress really supports Israel is because Jewish campaign donations. And what she refers to AIPAC, which is not a PAC, even though it kind of has the letters in it. That is incorrect. And they do not give money to Republicans. It's a complete and utter lie. Anyhow, moving on. She just more recently, the most recently, she used the classic anti-Semitic trope, and it's the canard called dual loyalty. She said that supporters of Israel, really, they just have an allegiance to a foreign power. The allegiance to a foreign power, that's a quote. Real treasure, Omar is, she is a true dang believer. Now, when you try now to tell people that Ilhan Omar is an anti-Semite, some people around here will believe, but many will say, no way. She's not really an anti-Semite. She's an anti-Zionist. Okay, she isn't really against Jews. She just hates Israel. This is not true. This is not true, and I will prove it to you. How can I prove it to you? So let's start with the history of Jewish anti-Semitism. We'll go to the money one. So in Europe, this is where this comes from. In Europe, there were usury laws because the way the Bible is written and the stories about Jesus throwing down the money, the tables of the money changers, and they thought that anything that had interest, what would we consider banking today? So anything that had interest, loans, that kind of thing, was against the commandments of God. And so it was illegal for any Christian to engage in usury, what we would call banking. Except, and this happened in the Middle East with Islam, the Jews. So, since the Jews are already going to hell, this is what the European kings thought. Well, let's just have the Jews do our banking for us. And so they did. But the problem with this was it made Jews look awful. And when things went bad, who was the first scapegoat to come? The Jews. Why the dual loyalty canard is anti-Semitism. And you can see this with the Nazis, where they say, you can't trust the Jews because the Jews aren't really for Germany. The Jews are only out for themselves and the other Jews in Europe and the world. They aren't really for Germany. This is called the dual loyalty canard. And you see this and the money one everywhere. The last one, mind control, and this is a more recent 20th century adaptation where you have the fake documents, the Elders of Zion, is this idea that the Jews control everything. They're the puppet masters in the background. They control everyone. And you can find, these are the three biggest tropes about Jews, not even talking about visual tropes about big noses, eating matzo balls, sacrificing babies. I'm not going into that right now. But these are the tropes of anti-Semites. Ilhan Omar has displayed every single one of them. If she says some point that Jews all they really do is hate Gentile children, I would not be surprised at this point. I mean, maybe they were Israeli children. They're non-Israeli children. These are classic anti-Semitical things to say. There's no way getting around it. But when you point this out on Twitter or Facebook or Reddit, what did they say? She didn't really mean that. She doesn't really mean that. What she's saying is she doesn't trust Israel. And you are wrong. Israel is corrupt. It has problems. And Bibi, that's Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's nickname, he's corrupt. And she's just talking about that. Now, nowhere in those tweets and sayings did I share with you she is ever specific about exactly what Israel or even AIPAC is doing. She isn't like, yes, they're using the power of Israel to force us to have a loyalty card to support the Benjamin Netanyahu regime. I mean, it's not specific at all. It's not, but they can't do it. Okay, so they either say she's for anti-Zionism, and here's the one that disgusts me. I am really honestly disgusted by this one, and this is Pelosi speaking. Hear this. This is as George W. Bush said, the soft bigotry of low expectations.
The incident that happened with, I don't think our colleague is anti-Semitic. I think she has a different experience in the use of words, doesn't understand that some of them are fraught with meaning that she didn't realize, but nonetheless, that we had to address.
Wow, so there you have it, folks. Little Ilhan Omar, she doesn't know better. She's not smart enough to comprehend anti-Semitism. She's an immigrant. She's from Somalia. She was in a camp in Kenya. She's She doesn't know the power of her words. And this, as awful as that wasn't the worst one. There were many others. Another one was Congressman Clyburn, who in an interview with The Hill, and it's too bad they don't have this in audio. Here's what The Hill Clyburn said. Clyburn came to Omar's defense Wednesday. He lamented that many of the media reports surrounding the recent controversy omitted mentioning that Omar was a Somali and he fled the country from violence, spent 4 years in a Kenyan refugee camp before the United States. Clyburn argues that her experience is more powerful, more empirical than people who are generations removed from Holocaust or the Japanese internment camp during World War II. Quote, I'm serious about that. There are people who tell me, well, my parents are Holocaust survivors. My parents did this. Oh, it's more personal with her, Clyburn said. I've talked to her, and I can tell you she is living through a lot of pain. Ah, yes. Her experience, her pain is more powerful than the children of Holocaust survivors. That's what James Clyburn would like us to know. You know what? Paul Krugman of the excruciable New York Times, he said that, well, only anti-Semitism from the right matters. Anti-Semites on the left, they don't really matter. The ones that matter are on the right. Yes, so it's okay if you're anti-Semite on the left. That's fine. Linda Sars, so where did this go to a head? So it came to a head this week that after several Democrats, the guy that was in charge of the Foreign Relations Committee, and a few in the media came out and says, what the heck, Omar? Do you know what you're saying? You need to fix this. And so there was a push on Congress to have a resolution that said anti-Semitism was wrong and that this would be pointed at Ilhan Omar. Well, what happened was the resolution being led by Nancy Pelosi, which originally was about anti-Semitism, got watered down to the point where it meant nothing. I'm just going to read a little bit from the bill text. United States have exploited, continue to exploit bigotry and weaponized hate for political gains, targeting traditionally persecuted peoples, including, here's the list: African Americans, check. Latinos, check. Native Americans, check. Asian Americans, check. Pacific Islanders, check. Other people of color, Jews, check. Muslims, check. Hindus, check. Sikhs, check. The LGBTQ community, check. Immigrants, check. And others with verbal attacks, incitement, and violence. Yes, it was a very pointless thing. So it was so pointless that 23 representatives, most of them Republicans, decided to vote against it because they said that, no, we are not going to vote for this measure because this is obviously, we're saying we're okay with anti-Semitism, and we're not. Okay, we're not. And Omar, this in the end didn't mean anything. Omar's going to stay on one of the most powerful committees in the House of Representatives, which is the Foreign Relations Committee. Almost zero freshman Democrats end up with a chair in there. It's amazing she was given it. So some people have been bragging about this. Well, David Duke, he sent out this thing saying Ilhan Omar is the most important member of Congress. Heart, heart emoji. Oh, I love Ilhan Omar. And of course, David Duke is a giant white supremacist KKK guy. Who else? Well, Louis Farrakhan loves this. This is another friend of Omar and the Fresh Faces crew. Not all of them, but many of them. Another one was Linda Sarsour, who I can't. That would be a podcast episode unto itself. Everything that Linda Sarsour is in and influential, but she's a pro-Sharia. What is it called? CAIR, which is American Islamic Relations. Committee for American Islamic Relations, which is a front for Hamas. Whole loads of things. She was a big responsible person for turning the Women's March into an anti-Semite fest. And I said on this podcast that the Women's March days are numbered. And so Sarsour came out and she's bragging. She's bragging that the expanding the language of the resolution can include condemning all forms of bigotry is her. That she went and she talked to Pelosi and she talked to Congress and she pushed them to just make this about the evil of patriarchy doing the dirty work of powerful white men. Oh, boy. And that's what happened. So something that should have been unequivocal to say anti-Semitism is wrong. Omar was wrong. That meant nothing now. It meant nothing now. And some of the people that voted against it, who AOC are calling. AOC and the media are now calling the Republicans racist because so many of them didn't vote for this, which is gaslighting of the highest order. They just can't do it because they recognize what this is. This is caving to anti-Semitism and normalizing people who are anti-Semites. We are including Linda Sarsour and Ilhan Omar into the national conversation of the community of intersectionals. This is like saying Linda Sarsour and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, they get to be priests in the high religion of intersectionality. They are going to be our kings and queens of wokeness. That is crazy. It is. It is crazy and it is wrong and it is disgusting to me. And I am not alone in this. And there are some Democrats, particularly people who are Jewish or the children of Holocaust survivors, that find this offensive and wrong. Something that actually should be offensive. One of these is Representative Ted Deutsch from Florida, a Democrat. And he came to the floor and he talked about this resolution. And this is a powerful condemnation.
Jewish elected officials are saying that this history that we know well is invoked by referencing dual loyalty, and some of my colleagues are saying that it doesn't matter what that history means to me. It is intensely personal because it is ongoing in Europe, in Asia, in the Middle East, in South America, and in the United States. 11 people were killed less than 6 months ago in a synagogue because they're Jews. What's happening in our country should alarm us all. The attacks on our colleagues because they are Muslim or African American or Hispanic or members of the LGBT community, any attack must be condemned when it's based on hatred. But when a colleague invokes classic anti-Semitic lies 3 times, then this body must condemn that anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is worthy of being taken seriously on its own. It's worthy of being singularly called out. Jews control the world. Jews care only about money. Jews have dual loyalty and can't be patriotic members of the country in which they live. Words matter. For generations, they have had dangerous consequences for me, for my family, and for my people. This shouldn't be so hard. I yield back.
Wow, that was very powerful. That Ted Deutsch from Florida, Representative Florida, and a Democrat, came out strong against it. Well, there's this talk about intersectionality, anti-Semitism. Why is anti-Semitism coming out now? Anti-Semitism used to be one of the evils, that the intersectionals believed against, I should say. They fought against. But the Jews, since they are made up mostly of white people, are now out of the intersectionality pyramid and are worthy of being taken down. I've talked about before where a lot of these intersectionals will call that, Jews, saying a person is Jew is just saying another way to say that they're white. So being Jewish is no longer considered part of the protected class that's inside this intersectional pyramid. And someone that came out, and this is why you will see more and more of anti-Semitism, because it's no longer a bad thing in the religion of the intersectional left. Meghan McCain, daughter of John McCain, who's on The View. I don't agree with her always, but sometimes she is on the ball. She came out and said, I take this very personally. I don't have family that's Jewish, but we have friends that are Jewish, like Joe Lieberman and his wife. They are my family. I take hate crimes in this country very seriously. What's happening in Europe is very scary. Sorry if I get emotional. I know I'm technically not Jewish. She was going on that, just because you're not of Jewish blood doesn't mean that you can't take this as a serious issue. Quote, "It is very dangerous, and I think we collectively as Americans on both sides, and what Ilhan Omar is saying is very scary to me and very scary to a lot of people, and I don't think you have to be Jewish to recognize that." Well, the leftist media proving how incredibly, incredibly gross and disgusting that they have become, came out with this awful, awful cartoon. It was by this one artist called Eli Valley. He does political cartoons, and it's monstrous. It really is. It's monstrous. It has all the classic tropes there. The matzo balls, the baby's blood. It even has a Jewish star, the yellow Jewish star. I mean, it's really gross. People are rightly calling it extremely anti-Semitic because it is. It is very anti-Semitic. Just nasty. One thing, I was surprised after Meghan McCain said this. I was, reading the Gizmodo Network articles, as I frequently do, and there was this one from Concourse. What you need to know about Meghan McCain's Jewish heritage. And you read this, and you can just hear the snarky vehemence, the vitriol just spewing forth from David Roth. That's the author of this piece. He says, here's the 4 points. Meghan McCain is not Jewish. That's point number 1. Number 2, at no point did Meghan McCain convert to Judaism. Okay. Point 3, she's Christian, born and raised. Point 4, her father was friends with former Connecticut Senator Joe Lieberman. Point 5, she enjoys pastrami sandwiches. Yes. He says, at the risk of editorializing, here's a final thought. Anti-Semites might do well to consider how upset their hatred of Jewish people has made Meghan McCain take a long look in the mirror. It's gross. It's gross. So Meghan McCain says that anti-Semitism is not cool. And many people on the left say, well, she's not really Jewish. Her opinion doesn't matter. We don't really care. The only anti-Semitism that matters is on the right. And, Ilhan Omar, she didn't really know what she's saying. She's just a stupid immigrant. She's just a stupid minority. She doesn't know what she's saying. And you hear all this from the people who preach to us constantly that we need to tear things down. And white people need to shut up and, put out. They need to grovel and need to put the minorities and the poor afflicted LGBTQ people forward. That they are the very first ones to begin to use these anti-Semitic, disgusting intersectional tropes that they tell us all day and night to never, ever, ever get close or use. And I know I'm getting a little passionate over it, but it's so very frustrating. And this is the problem with intersectionality, because particularly for white people, when you believe that the value of a person is denoted to the color of their skin, it's immutable characteristics, things they can't change, there's a word for that. It's called racism. And what happens is, if you think that black people can never make it and that they need help to get there because they'll never be able to make it on their own merit, you actually begin to believe that blacks are worth just a little less. And that is the difference between the 2019 conservatives and the 2019 progressives. We believe we should look at people with color blindness. We believe in Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream that we treat each and every person based upon their character, not the color of their skin. Here's my last thought on this. The Star Tribune decided to do man-on-the-street interviews with people in the Twin Cities about Ilhan Omar. And with the exception of 1 or 2 people, the majority of them said similar things that I just said, that she doesn't know better, that she's a Muslim and they're only trying to attack her because they're Islamophobes. And it does make me worry, because part of me wanted to believe that though we have these activists who have this incredibly racist mindset that is throughout our country's leadership and in the leadership of different communities and media platforms, I was hoping that at least in these big cities where these people are leading, that the people themselves do not feel this way. And what I get from the Star Tribune article is that this stuff is slowly being imbibed into the people themselves. Do I think we're going to end up with Holocaust concentration camps? No. But any anti-Semitism is wrong. And I go to that Thomas Jefferson quote. Because I believe God is just, I worry for my country. All right, well, let's take a quick break. Then I have this awesome Bill Maher clip that it makes me smile. I'm glad that I'm not the only one that's talking about this stuff. Particularly, I'm glad from people who are big on the left. All right, well, this has been Happy Warrior Pete, the Happy Warrior Podcast. Be back in just a bit.
you're onto something. I talk about it here a lot, that there is I would say, a cancer on progressivism with some of the, I guess they call themselves social justice warriors. I don't think they're interested in justice. I don't think they're interested in truth. I think they're interested in clicks. I think they're interested in things that make people click. And when I read them, it makes me glad I didn't have kids who would see this. Hey, I got a smattering of applause there.
Well, social justice is a noble idea.
Exactly.
It is the idea of fairness
Yes.
and equality in a just society. In practice, it has become antipathy towards notions like meritocracy, like you can rise above your station in life, or colorblindness in institutions.
Right.
White supremacists believe all this stuff too.
Yes, and it seems like they just say things to dare you, to oppose them, that would then make you a bad person. Like they'll say, there are 71 genders. Disagree with that, asshole.
Oh man, that was Bill Maher on Real Time with Bill Maher on HBO. He had with him Noah Rothman and Mary Catherine Ham. I love both of them. They're both conservative journalists and writers and authors. He talks in that interview, it's 5 minutes, so I just wanted to play a clip of that, just enough so you can understand what he's talking about, but not enough I get in trouble for pushing past fair use. But he's got it down. He's got nailed down to exactly about the problem, about this crowd. And it's very, very insightful. It's very well done. I mean, he talks about cultural appropriation, how that's ridiculous because no one is really harmed by cultural appropriation. No one hardly complains. So I want to do, before we go, I just wanted to remind you guys that the Happy Warrior podcast is on Twitter, it's on Facebook, it's on Minds.com. Please check us out on all three. It's Happy Warrior Pete on Facebook and Minds.com, and just Happy Warrior Pete on Twitter. And please, if you like what you heard today, please rate and review on iTunes. Give us a 5-star, write why you like it, and that will help people to find our podcast on iTunes. Please tell your friends, your family, your dog sitter, your goldfish's previous owner's second cousin's dog handler's sister. Tell her too. Tell them all. Tell them all. Well, let's continue to grow this thing. Where our numbers have been much better lately. I've been very pleased with that. I've been putting out the most effort and labor I possibly can. I'm trying to grow this thing. We have in the pipeline a paper we're going to try to get published. I'm writing it in the style of The Federalist. It's a little lengthy. It's going to be a little controversial. Kind of exciting. Robert is helping me with that. We just need help getting the research done on it. Maybe do another draft or so, and we'll publish that. So you should probably be expecting that to come out this week. And then I have in the pipeline, Congressman Dusty Johnson's team has agreed to let me have an interview with him, and we are setting that up. I also may have an interview with some other people, big names. That is very exciting. So please, please, please rate, review, check us out on social media, tell your friends and family, and let's continue to grow the Happy Warrior podcast. Okay, so what are we going to do? Our last hard news segment of the day. What should we talk about? I want to talk about something that's very alarming to me. So I've talked to you about Silicon Valley and how Silicon Valley is getting pretty quick with the ban hammer. Okay, either they ban you outright or they shadow ban you, so they put you in a digital ghetto so that only you and a few followers can see you, but generally you're hidden from the rest of the internet, or you're very difficult to get to. Shadow ban is a term that came from Twitter where people can only see your tweets if they clicked on your page. And you can see this with YouTube, Google, Pinterest, Facebook. They all do this in some form. They'll adjust the algorithm so it's harder to find you, harder to find conservative ideas. I talked about this last week. So if you check out that episode, we handled that pretty well. What is really bothering me and how this story has evolved is that Silicon Valley, these companies are private. The public sector has now decided to join hands with them. And I'm particularly aimed at Democrats, but I'm sure Republicans would be just as awful if they got the chance. Adam Schiff sent this letter out. Representative Adam Schiff from California, he's a Democrat, sent a letter to Jeff Bezos basically threatening them and complaining that Amazon uses its algorithms and allows people to push misinformation and paid advertising for the anti-vaccine movement. Now, I am not an anti-vaxxer. Yes, vaccines do come with some risks, but that risk does not include autism. People can have allergic reactions to vaccines. It's rare, but it does happen. Vaccines aren't always effective. That's why you often have to check a couple months later to see if your vaccine took. In very, very small, rare cases, actually causes people to develop a form of the disease. So there are problems, but the vast, vast, vast majority of people, vaccines are effective, work, and okay. However, I believe in the battle of ideas, the marketplace of ideas, and so the anti-vaxxers should be allowed to say their piece. What has happened is the federal government, the leaders of the federal government, and Adam Schiff is not alone, is now telling Silicon Valley, you kick the anti-vaxxers off your platform or else. And the Silicon Valley says, I like it, can I have some more? And that's what this is about. See, Amazon, all of them caved one by one. So Amazon was the first. And so they no longer sell books about anti-vaccination. They no longer have documentaries about anti-vaccination on the Amazon Prime platform. And they were the first to do this. Currently, you can donate the Amazon Smile money to the anti-vaxxer charity, but very little money comes from that. So I don't know if that's that big of a deal, but that'll probably be closed any day or hour now. There was a great piece on this subject by Michelle Malkin, so shout out to Michelle Malkin. I have a picture of her somewhere on my Facebook profile. She's a pretty cool, very short journalist. I have a lot of respect for her. She talked about this, that, her family, she is for vaccines, but, she doesn't jump up and down always for them. She questions them. She's skeptical, as any journalist, any reporter should be. Skeptical about everything. Skeptic till it annoys everyone around you. Okay, that's what I believe in. And Michelle Malkin believes in that too. My friend John Ziegler, who we interviewed 2 episodes back, believes in that as well. But not everyone does. And some people want them to shut up. See, it's not just Adam Schiff. The CDC is one of these people that has contacted Twitter, Facebook, and Google and is urging them to, quote, this is the CDC to the Silicon Valley, quote, use whatever mechanism they have available to stop promoting pseudoscience. Yes, that is the federal government telling a private company that it's okay, just stop the bad speech we don't like. Make the bad man go away. This is crazy. I can't believe this, that we're okay with this, that this is just happening. And the reason they get away with this is because no one really likes except for the people that believe in it, no one likes the anti-vaxxers. They're weird, they are neurotic, they're very vocal and passionate, and they're basically conspiracy theorists. And they're just annoying as heck. So no one really wants to have to deal with them. And so we let them because they're weird. And John Ziegler, we talked about this before, that it's the weird ones that always get hit first because they're the easy targets. Okay, he talked about even when it's at an individual level like Vic Mañana or Jerry Sandusky, or if it is when you want to push and ban something in the marketplace of ideas. So in this case, vaccinations, the anti-vaccination crowd. This is crazy. So what happens next? Well, Facebook has now banned it. They say you can't post stories about vaccinations. If you do, you'll get the shadow ban. They don't call it shadow ban, but that's what they'll do. They demonetized all anti-vaccination channels. I won't be surprised at all if those get shuttered altogether soon. And we don't know where else in the algorithm that they're messing with it so you can't see anti-vaccination stuff. This is a little scary. One of the few people that spoke out about this is Senator Rand Paul, who has libertarian leanings, and he pointed out that it's wrong to say there are no risks to vaccines. We pay over $4 billion to the Federal Vaccine Injury Compensation Program for adults and children who have been injured, but it is wrong to be closing avenues of speech off just because we don't like them. Okay? We don't like the anti-vaccine crowd, but that doesn't mean we should have the right, nor is it a good idea to close them off. One of the things about Alex Jones, when they closed him off last year, is he just had an episode on the Joe Rogan podcast. It's 3 hours. Alex Jones is still pretty big. And I think when he got closed to its listeners, I think it made them bond even closer to him. Because they're like, yeah, see, everybody's out to get Alex. He must be on to something. It's this idea that, oh, when there's opposition, it must be that you're right. This is a little disturbing to me. Pinterest is now another one that's saying that they will not allow anti-vaccination stuff. YouTube has said that they will change the algorithm and only allow authoritative sources, including, by the way, the issue of Captain Marvel. See, Captain Marvel used to have a bunch of these very critical pieces about it, about all Brie Larson's terrible political pandering that was messing up with the marketing campaign. And YouTube just says, well, it will make this a news subject, quote, news, unquote. And so this means that only authoritative, i.e. old traditional media outlets, they'll be at the top. And then you'll have to scroll through a lot of stuff to eventually get to your independent YouTubers that, are more critical. And it doesn't just apply, though. See, that's the problem. See, I say it starts with a vaccination crowd, but it moves on to something more serious. And for my example, I want to go to, and this is a little strange, Tommy Robinson. Now, Tommy Robinson is a bit of a controversial right-ish wing person. He's part of UKIP, which is a independence party in the United Kingdom. Yeah, it's a United Kingdom Independence Party, UKIP. He was the founder of, I can't even think of its name now. It was this group that became a white supremacist group. Anyhow, he disavowed it once it became that way. I don't always agree with him. He has been more raucous. He's not always exact and specific in his attacks. So, there are videos of him saying sort of racist stuff, but they were just videos supposedly, he didn't take them, someone else did. I don't know what to take into it. But again, like I'm saying, Tommy Robinson he doesn't deserve to be banned. Like, I'm not saying you should promote Tommy Robinson, but he shouldn't be banned for speaking. Tommy Robinson became most famous last year when he was the only one willing to take video of this gang going to court of Islamic pedophiles that were abducting and raping British girls. And when the parents went to the police, they said, too bad, we're not allowed to talk to you about it. And so Tommy Robinson says, you know what, I'm just going to take this into my hands. The BBC won't report it. The police won't talk about it. I'm just going to take video of these guys going to court. He was on the other side of the street. He was arrested for this. He was thrown into prison. It was a long affair. Eventually he got out. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And it's kind of gained fame. So he's a force of his own. He has a bit of a political force because he's become this independent guy that's willing to tell the truth. He kind of has this feel in Britain. He's also, in Britain, they also look at him, many people, as this disgusting maggot who is just an embarrassment. A lot of the people in the Conservative Party feel this way about him. He just represents bad stuff and he gives us a bad name. They may have some truth to that. But Tommy Robinson does deserve to be allowed to say his piece. Apparently not so. See, this came to me through PG Media. His book, they were banning, I'll back this up. In the beginning of January, PJ Media reported that Amazon was taking points from the Council on American-Islamic Relations. This is the group that is a front for Hamas. Linda Sarsour loves them. Ilhan Omar loves them. They are always the first to attack anyone and call them Islamophobe or a bigot towards Islam, people from Islam and the Muslim religion. They're the FBI, the CIA have files on them. I mean, they have legitimate ties to terrorism. Anyhow, Amazon was using them and other groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center, another group that you really should never listen to, and was telling them which books and wares to not be allowed to be sold. Who gets the ban hammer? And so they were blocking any book that was critical of Islam. Well, it turns out that this led to Tommy Robinson. See, Tommy Robinson just came out with a book that he helped co-wrote called Muhammad's Quran. And it, well, you can guess what it talks about. I mean, it's an unflattering criticism of the Quran and the history of Muhammad himself. This is something you're not allowed to talk about at all. And this has led to all sorts of craziness. This was the justification people were looking for. So YouTube's banned him now. Facebook has banned him. Twitter and Instagram has banned him. They've all abandoned him because he created Muhammad's Quran. Now, this is where it gets really weird because the media was told about him being banned in the first place, and it looks like that there's a good, strong case to be made that Tommy Robinson wasn't banned for the book about Muhammad's Quran that's not allowed to be sold on Amazon. No, it looks like it's because he called the BBC out for wasting taxpayer dollars. So he did this documentary, and I can't even think of its name. It's like Panorama something. Anyhow, sorry. Panodrama. The Panodrama, where he had activists, not quite a reporter, working for him, that was meeting with this journalist for the BBC, a documentarian called Todd Sweeney. And in the video, Todd Sweeney does a couple bad things that you should never do as journalists. One, he is spending left and right on the taxpayer's dime for very expensive food and drink, and he knows it, and he brags about it. He says, which is the champagne and the double gin? We're going to have some red wine. Here I am in expenses in a boozer. F it. No expense spared. Make it 220 pounds. That's pretty expensive food. That's like 350 or so here. Anyhow, the interview, the BBC guy says that white working class males are aliens from outer space and they're like Amazonian cannibals. The way Tommy Robinson got in for this was a friend of his was approached to work on this documentary, which was being described by Mr. Sweeney as the Tommy Takedown. This was going to be co-funded by the group Hope Not Hate, which is a George Soros organization. And it was just a gigantic mess. I mean, there's some more to it. The guy was trying to set it up as a gotcha interview. He said some very weird things about the IRA. It's just a strange, very, very strange recording. So it really embarrassed the BBC. I mean, big embarrassment. And it was right after this that we got the announcement, Tommy Robinson's book is banned. Tommy Robinson's banned on YouTube. Tommy Robinson's banned on Facebook. Tommy Robinson banned on Twitter. And a guy for the BBC, this is not Todd Sweeney, someone else, actually said this. He says, I can reveal I recently had a meeting with Facebook to discuss Tommy Robinson pages and their impact in brainwashing his supporters to become the terrorist use violence against Muslims. A very good result, and I'm proud of my role. So, a director, broadcaster on the BBC, bragging that he convinced Facebook to ban Tommy Robinson. So if you're a Brit, and you feel that the BBC and the media and the political system, Labour particularly, all working together to take people that hold your political beliefs down, this is that evidence, and it's hard to discount it. It really is, because it gets even worse. For example, Raheem Kassam, and he used to be a guy with Breitbart London, worked for the Daily Caller. He worked for Nigel Farage. He was banned right around this time. And they did restore it and said it was just an accident. Well, if it was such an accident, how do we get this story? Facebook's purge of British right-wingers followed political pressure. So Tommy Robinson was far from the only right-winger that got banned on Facebook and elsewhere. And it was a bunch of people who were in the British Conservative Party and people who were part of UKIP. Okay? And this ban that went against Robinson, we now have proof that members of the BBC and members of the Labour Party were actively talking to Silicon Valley companies to ban Tommy Robinson and other people on the political British right. And I should add that Tommy Robinson's days are numbered. It was recently announced by some Labour Party people that Tommy Robinson is going to face some new contempt of court proceedings that come out of that thing with the Muslim rape gangs. So they are not done with him. Not at all. This is happening. This is British government working with Silicon Valley to get people they don't like banned, which is a mere reflection of what I just talked about here in the U.S., where the federal government grabs the hand of its best buddy, Silicon Valley, and they go together down the street to ban what they don't like, which in this case is the anti-vaxxers. This is a dangerous precedent to set. This really is. This is New Deal kind of stuff. I mean, this is propaganda kind of stuff. This is a very dangerous precedent to be set, and I don't know, for one, and I really don't really trust Silicon Valley all that much because their standards on free speech are pretty low these days. But somehow I'm supposed to, separate from that, trust the federal government. They aren't going to abuse their powers. It wasn't that long ago in the Obama administration that Lois Lerner, head of the IRS, was using it to punish conservative and libertarian and Christian political groups and deny them non-for-profit and not-for-profit tax status. They were, they were stopping them from organizing, putting their charters to the IRS. All kinds of weird, wacky stuff was going on. And Lois Lerner, no one at the IRS ever lost their job. No one at the IRS ever got in trouble. The Obama administration turned to the Trump administration, and as far as we know, it ended. Well, we have now stories where the IRS is now targeting, and this is where, again, I worry, because here's another group that the federal government feels they should go after. The IRS is ruling that certain drug policy reform groups are not allowed to be a tax-exempt organization. It's in now this is a little obscure, but it's an Internal Revenue Bulletin. Okay, it's a rule, and it says that IRS will deny tax-exempt status to an organization whose purpose is directed to the improvement of business conditions of one or more lines of business relating to, blah, blah, blah. They involving controlled substances. This is saying that groups that want us to legalize drugs, it's okay if you deny them certain tax statuses. Now, people are saying that this is against the Constitution, that this is illegal, that this is wrong, and those are all true. And I don't know how long it will take for that to change. But this is just another example, guys. This is something that's controversial speech that the federal government does not like, and they are banning it. And I don't like the idea of the federal government and the Silicon Valley working together to take out the things or people or issues they don't like. It's not a good thing. It wasn't good when it was just the private companies. It wasn't good when it was the federal government. But these two team up. It's like Mario and Luigi. I mean, what crazy and wonderful and beautiful things they're going to get up to. I could talk about how Google, they never killed off Project Dragonfly. That Google employees just revealed that they found out that the project is there's still new code every day, and that the project just changed names. But it looks like Google's still planning on doing it. I just don't trust these people. And here's the point when I go back to intersectionality for the last time. Intersectionality justifies you to do a heck of a lot. When you think something is of a religious level of power, it authorizes you to do things you otherwise would normally never do. If you believe it's a religion, then this is a crusade. Okay? This is a crusade. This is a jihad. This is righteous and justified. Of course it's wrong. Those anti-vaxxers are wrong. They're making children sick. Measles are up. We must stop them and their evil misinformation. When intersectionality, when you want to justify your claims and ideas, free speech does not matter. In Britain, they already have come out and gone after political actors that are just on their own. Fortunately, we have the First Amendment, but as I just showed with that IRS story, sometimes they don't let that get in their way, and we have more and more calls every day, particularly from those that want socialism, that, it's better to have government control than to have dissidents trying to use their rights for something we just don't like. It's worrisome to me. I really am worried about where our country is going some days. I hope we learn our lesson before it gets too bad, because while I don't think we're going to go to Nazi Germany stuff. I think we're laying the groundwork for something barbaric and monstrous. I don't know what that would look like, but it'd be bad. It would be bad, and it was something to go down in history as one of the great evils. We need to watch ourselves and learn from this. And if we want to be woke, we need to be the true woke and wake up to our problems and reform it from the inside out. One of the most important things, and this is one of my problems I have with my podcast, is I'm really great at laying out the problems that are happening. I can even lay out to you much of why they're happening, but there isn't a good solution. Here's the best solution I can give for you. We need to return to strong families and strong religion. That does not sound at all interesting, and I can't blame you. Families and religion, that's a boring solution. Well, it is. Because the reason why intersectionality has so much control in our lives is because the places that family and religion used to hold, the things that gave us meaning in life, have been replaced by politics. And intersectionality is that number one ideology. That is why we are in the mess we are in. And that is why people are feeling justified to use the powers of big government and companies to push down the things they don't like and promote the things they do. I think another problem is I think that our lives have become so convenient that we've lost connection to growing. You know, here's my last piece of media I want to share with you. This study came out, and it shows that people that go through war, that people that have big traumatic events in their lives, are more religious. And this was a survey. It was published in the Nature Human Behavior, and it shows that the idea that there are no atheists in foxholes is true. That people who go through war tend to end up being more religious. They did like 1,700 interviews. They went through 71 villages in Sierra Leone, Tajikistan, and Uganda. And they found that those who are most experienced to war, their membership in religious groups increased by 12, 14, and 41 percentage points, respectively. If you want to solve the country, the first thing you need to do is you need to find meaning and reason in your life that's not politics. And you need to take care of the people who are closest to you. If you want to be a true happy warrior and help turn this country around and turn us from this abyss that we seem to be running towards as fast as we can, you need to turn in your own lives, turn this around and find meaning in your life. Teach your kids to find meaning in that which is real and good. And you know, if you have a problem in your life, you need to try to fix it. Or if you seek help, seek from your loved ones, even your church or some organization. But, you know, you keep it on the small level. You don't feel that a big, giant government or corporation has to fix your problems. A religion, you know, it gives people meaning. It teaches people morality and philosophy. Teach your kids the history of these things that are coming our way. If we all did this, then all these other problems we could turn away from because we had some principles that we are sitting strong on top of. You know that there's this, you know, if you're Christian, you know this. And there's this old story, and there's a song in my church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. It's about the wise man and the foolish man. It's from the parable in the New Testament where Jesus is saying, you know, there's this wise man, there's a foolish man. And they're talking to each other. The foolish man, he builds his house, but he builds his house on the sand. The wise man, he builds his house on the rock. And this foundation makes a difference because when the rains come and the waves rush up, it takes out that house on the sand. It's not built on any strong foundation, any strong principle. It just wiped out. With the tide of nature and the winds of change, it's just wiped off the face of the map. But the house on the rock stood still. It stayed. And that's what we need to be. Every day, in our own families, in our lives, in our churches, we need to be setting our houses on those stable foundations. And I'll tell you, in my own faith and in my own family, the reason I can hold on and go through all these hard trials, particularly this trial of my chronic pancreatitis and almost no pain treatment. The reason why I can hold on is because I have faith in my relationship with my Savior. I have faith in the love of my family. I have faith in the wisdom of God. And I have faith in the divine blessings and principles that were given to us. And we found again in the Scottish part of the Enlightenment that in our founding documents, in the Declaration of Independence, the United States Constitution, those are divine documents. Yes, they are imperfect. They were made by men. But they put forth principles that our nation could strive to live by. Though we weren't perfect, we always wanted to do better. And that's why Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King both, in a way, are founders of our nation. because they helped us to rise and come closer to those principles we all hold dear. Well, now we want to throw them away. So many of us want to throw them away. That is wrong. We need to cling to our principles. We need to cling to our religions. We need to cling to our family. And if we do those things, we'll be all right. Even if the world turns bad, if we have at least those things in our life, I think we'll be able to weather this storm. And not to get too religious, but this is something I heartfully pray and hope you'll take my advice on. And amen. Amen, brother. Amen. Well, this has been the Happy Warrior Podcast with your favorite host, Peter Pischke, otherwise known as Happy Warrior Pete. I'm grateful to have all of you here with me today. I know this is a bit long-winded. I had a family member like, your podcast is too long, but he's used to Daily Wire podcasts, so, those are like 50 minutes, and if you skip the commercial, it's like a half hour. Anyhow. But I like this podcast. I hope you guys too. I'll keep working on it, keep trying to make it better, keep trying to learn from my mistakes, keep communicating on the social medias, which is why you need to check us out on Facebook, in Minds.com, Happy Warrior Pete, and on Twitter, Happy Warrior P. Send me a message, say hi, I love that. Also, please rate and review us on iTunes, and tell all your family, friends, and Goldfish previous owners, cousins, dog walkers, stepfather-in-law. You guys have been great. God bless the United States. God bless the troops who shed sweat, tears, and blood for our sacred liberties. Them and you are really great, and I hope you know it. All right, well, good night, America.
Thank you for listening. The Happy Warrior Podcast, hosted by Peter Vaughn Pischke, produced by Robert Mehling, a production of the Sioux Empire Podcast Network. Learn more at happy-warrior.net.
僕らは出会うだろう同じ鼓動の音を目印にしてここにいるよいつだって飛んでるからくたびれた理由が重なって揺れる時生まれた意味を知る存在が続く限り
A production of the SiouxEmpire.com